When a child grows up in an environment where they constantly feel unwanted, ignored, or treated like a burden, something deep inside them begins to break long before they even understand what's happening. And before we go deeper, make sure you hit subscribe, because the truths I'm about to reveal are things most people never talk about, but they shape lives forever. A child doesn't know how to question love. They only know how to absorb it. And when love doesn't come, when it turns into coldness, rejection, or silent resentment, that child starts believing there is something wrong with them. They begin to see themselves through the eyes of the people who dislike them. Their self-worth becomes fragile. Their trust becomes shaky. Their heart becomes tired. And even though they're small, they carry emotions far too heavy for their age. A hated child isn't just dealing with the absence of affection. They're dealing with confusion. They wonder why they are treated differently. They notice how their siblings are praised while they are judged. They hear the sighs, the irritated tones, the comparisons. They see the lack of patience. And slowly, their identity starts forming around rejection. Keep watching till the end, because what happens next explains so much about the adults we meet who seem strong on the outside but broken on the inside. Some children respond by becoming extremely quiet, almost invisible, thinking that staying out of the way might protect them from more hurt. Others become aggressive, not because they are bad, but because anger becomes their shield. Some grow desperate to please everyone, believing that if they are perfect enough, someone will finally accept them. And some learn early that love is conditional, something you earn, not something you deserve. What people don't understand is this. A child who grows up feeling hated doesn't leave the pain behind when they grow up. They carry it. They carry it into their relationships, their friendships, their work, their self-image. They become adults who expect rejection even when it isn't there. They overthink love. They doubt compliments. They fear abandonment. They struggle to trust even when someone is genuinely kind. And here's the painful truth. A hated child doesn't usually hate the people who rejected them. They hate themselves for not being enough. Behind their silence is fear. Behind their anger is sadness. Behind their confidence is overcompensation. Behind every choice is a deep need to protect a heart that has already been wounded long before it was ready. And this is why it is so important to understand the psychology of a hated child, because it shows how powerful early emotional experiences are, and how a single environment can shape an entire life. Before we go deeper into the hidden patterns, the secret behaviors, and the adult struggles that come from this childhood wound, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Here we break down the emotions people hide, the wounds no one sees, and the silent battles millions are fighting every single day. Hit that button and stay with me to the very end, because the next part explains the survival habits that almost every hated child develops. When a child feels hated in their own home, they learn to read silence the way other children read storybooks. They study faces. They study moods. They watch every shift in tone, because their survival depends on predicting when the next emotional blow might come. Their mind becomes trained to scan for danger, even in peaceful situations. Not because they're dramatic, but because their earliest memories taught them that the world is not gentle with them. And here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. So keep watching. A child who feels unwanted starts blaming themselves for everything. If someone is angry, they think it's their fault. If something goes wrong, they assume they caused it. This mindset becomes their default setting. Instead of thinking they're stressed, they think, I messed up again. This self-blame follows them into adulthood like a shadow, whispering doubts into their mind at every step. Some of these children try to become perfect, as if perfection can protect them. They push themselves harder than anyone expects. They become overly responsible, overly polite, overly helpful. They chase perfection not out of ambition, but out of fear. They think, maybe if I'm flawless, someone will finally love me. But perfection is a moving target. And no matter how hard they try, they always feel not enough. Others go in the opposite direction. They become rebellious, loud, distant, or angry. They build walls made of sarcasm, defiance, or silence. Their anger becomes armor. Their boldness becomes protection. Their distance becomes their shield. They're not trying to be difficult. They're trying to protect the last remaining pieces of themselves. And when it comes to relationships, everything becomes complicated. Compliments feel suspicious. Kindness feels temporary. Attention feels dangerous. They expect people to leave, so they prepare for abandonment even when no one is leaving. But behind all these layers is one simple truth. A child who feels hated never wanted anything complicated. They never asked for perfection or luxury. All they ever craved was warmth, softness, and a sense of belonging. When they didn't receive that, their mind learned to survive in the only ways it could, by adapting, by hiding, by overthinking, by trying to become someone worthy of the love they were denied. And if you want to understand the hidden psychology behind their self-esteem, their relationships, their fears, and their adult personality, keep watching till the end. This story isn't just about childhood. It's about how childhood never truly leaves us. Subscribe, stay with me, and let's continue. When a child grows up feeling hated, one of the deepest wounds they carry is the belief that their emotions are too much or unwanted. Early on, they learn that expressing sadness annoys people, that showing fear brings criticism, and that needing comfort makes them a burden. So they begin to silence themselves. They train their heart to stay quiet. They swallow their tears because they know no one will wipe them. They shrink their feelings because they fear those feelings will be used against them. This emotional shutdown becomes a lifelong habit. And before we go deeper into the hidden patterns behind this pain, make sure you hit subscribe and stay with me to the end, because the next parts explain behaviors that even adults don't realize come from childhood wounds. Over time, this child starts building an inner world where they feel safer than in the real one. They create imaginary moments where someone understands them, listens without judgment, and offers affection without conditions. These fantasies aren't childish. They're survival. When reality refuses comfort, the mind builds its own. But the tragedy is that when these children grow up, these inner worlds become hard to leave behind. They may struggle to trust real people because the acceptance in their imagination feels safer than the unpredictable reactions of others. A child who feels hated also becomes incredibly observant. They notice everything, every sigh, every shift in tone, every silent tension in a room. They sense it instantly. They read energy the way others read signs. This hyper-awareness comes from years of trying to avoid further hurt. While this sharp intuition becomes a strength, it also becomes a curse. They grow empathetic understanding, deeply sensitive to others' emotions, yet constantly anxious. Their minds overthink small details, imagining dangers that don't exist, worrying about things that haven't even happened. One of the saddest parts of their psychology is how quickly they learn to accept crumbs of affection. When love is rare, even a small gesture feels massive. A gentle tone, a brief smile, a small compliment. They hold on to these moments like treasures, replaying them again and again, convincing themselves that maybe, just maybe, they are not entirely unwanted. But this creates a dangerous, lifelong pattern. As adults, they may tolerate inconsistent or unhealthy relationships because they learned young that a little bit of love is better than none. This is why many settle for less than they deserve, not because they don't want more, but because their inner child has been starved for so long. Another deep psychological impact is how they learn to hide their real personality. A hated child becomes whoever they need to be to survive. If silence keeps them safe, they become quiet. If humor softens tension, they become funny. If responsibility earns approval, they mature too quickly. They don't grow an identity. They grow a mask. And by adulthood, the mask becomes so natural that they no longer know who they are without it. They are experts at pleasing others, but strangers to their own desires. Experts at avoiding conflict, but inexperienced at expressing their real needs. This is the heartbreaking truth. A child who grows up feeling hated becomes an adult who questions their worth even in rooms filled with people who care. Their past becomes a whisper in their mind, reminding them of the rejection they once faced. And unless they unlearn these patterns, they continue living a life shaped by wounds they never deserved. When a child grows up feeling hated, they start seeing themselves not as a person, but as a problem. This belief doesn't appear instantly. It grows slowly, like a shadow that stretches with every painful moment. They start believing they are the reason someone gets upset, the reason situations go wrong, The reason the house feels tense. They carry guilt for things they never caused. They apologize for mistakes that aren't theirs. They absorb blame because they fear being the target of anger. This isn't weakness, it's conditioning. It's survival. They also grow up constantly comparing themselves to others. They weren't taught confidence through love. They were taught measurement through criticism. They watched siblings, cousins, classmates getting praised for things they weren't even allowed to try. They see affection given elsewhere, while they must earn even a small acknowledgement. So they compete, not because they enjoy it, but because they believe love must be earned. No matter how hard they try, it never feels enough. That exhausting chase follows them into adulthood, where they keep proving, achieving, striving, just to feel worthy of the smallest bit of appreciation. On the outside, they might look mature, strong, responsible. But inside, they carry a fear of abandonment so intense that it impacts every relationship they enter. When someone gets close, they panic. When someone pulls away, they panic even more. They overanalyze tone, silence, messages, small changes, trying to predict the disaster they fear is coming. They crave reassurance, but feel guilty for needing it. They want closeness, but fear heartbreak. This emotional cycle is not their fault. It was taught to them by instability and rejection. Their attachment style also becomes deeply affected. A hated child doesn't form normal bonds. They form intense ones. Anyone who shows them even a little kindness becomes emotionally significant. What looks like overattachment is actually starvation. Their heart clings tightly to the affection it never received. This makes them compassionate, but also puts them at risk of choosing the wrong people, trusting the wrong people, and giving too much to those who don't deserve it. And perhaps most heartbreaking of all, they hide. They hide everything. Their fears, their pain, their insecurities. They learn to smile even when their chest feels empty. They learn to say, "I'm fine," because being honest was punished or ignored before. They learn to cope alone because no one ever came when they needed comfort. They build entire inner worlds where they store all the pain they couldn't express. And these inner worlds follow them into adulthood, quiet, heavy, untouched. But beneath all of this, beneath the masks and the fear and the self-blame, there is still a child who wanted nothing more than warm safety and a place where they mattered. Before we continue this emotional journey, make sure you hit subscribe, because here we uncover the parts of human psychology people hide, the wounds they carry silently, and the truths no one explains. Your support helps us keep creating raw, honest, and healing content. And trust me, the next part goes even deeper into the mind of a child who grows up believing they were never wanted. Stay with me till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming next. When a child grows up feeling hated, they begin to master the art of disappearing while still being physically present. They learn how to sit quietly in a room without demanding attention, how to blend into the background, so they don't become a target for criticism or frustration. Invisibility becomes their shield. They convince themselves that being unnoticed is safer than being disliked. And this habit follows them into adulthood. They hesitate to speak, to take space, to express their needs, because years of conditioning taught them that their voice is inconvenient and their presence is unwanted. They shrink themselves not because they lack potential, but because staying small once protected them. This shrinking also affects how they experience happiness. Children who grow up feeling hated learn that joyful moments can disappear in an instant. They may get excited about something only to be mocked, dismissed, or punished for it. So they start hiding their happiness, too. They fear that showing enthusiasm will invite sarcasm or cruelty. Even as adults, they struggle to fully enjoy good moments. They expect them to end. They guard their happiness like a secret, always waiting for something to go wrong. Joy becomes something they tiptoe around, something fragile, temporary, undeserved. Another painful psychological imprint is their difficulty trusting kindness. When someone is nice to them, they don't know how to handle it. Their mind immediately questions it. Why are they being kind? What do they want? And will they turn against me? This suspicion is not a flaw, it's protection. If the people who were supposed to love them first made them feel unwanted, the brain learns that affection is risky. So later in life, when they meet genuine warmth, they stay guarded. They keep their distance. They don't know how to receive care without expecting pain. This emotional armor often turns them into overly independent adults, not the healthy kind of independence, but the I have no other choice kind. They learn to rely on themselves because needing others once led to disappointment or rejection. They avoid asking for help even when they're drowning. They don't want to burden anyone. They handle their problems quietly, wipe their tears in private, and carry their weight alone. People might admire their strength, but what they don't see is the fear behind it, the fear of being let down again. Yet, beneath all this pain, something remarkable forms. A child who grows up feeling hated develops an extraordinary amount of compassion. Because they know how it feels to be hurt, they try their hardest never to hurt others. They become the kind of person who notices the emotions that aren't spoken, who senses pain behind a smile, who listens deeply and without judgment. Their sensitivity becomes a gift, but a gift shaped by suffering. They offer love the way they wish it had been offered to them. They care for others in ways no one cared for them. They become protectors, healers, quiet supporters, not because they were treated gently, but because they survived the opposite. And deep inside, they carry a hope, a fragile hope, that someday someone might give them the same soft love they've been giving to everyone else. When a child grows up feeling hated, they also begin to question their own reality. They see other families express warmth and affection and feel confused. They wonder why their own home never felt like that. They start to believe maybe their expectations are too high. Maybe love is supposed to feel distant. Maybe the coldness they grew up with is normal. Or worse, maybe they are the reason their home lacked harmony. This confusion becomes the foundation of their emotional world. And later in life, they struggle to recognize red flags in relationships because their childhood taught them that love can coexist with pain and discomfort is normal. Another heavy impact is how easily they become overwhelmed by rejection. Even small disagreements, mild criticism, or tiny misunderstandings can feel devastating. Their emotional threshold is low because they've spent years absorbing negativity their mind never processed. When someone is disappointed in them, it feels like reliving childhood rejection. When someone pulls away, it feels like abandonment. Their reactions are not about the present. They are echoes of the past. They feel deeply not because they're weak, but because their nervous system was shaped by fear. Over time, this sensitivity creates a strong need for reassurance. They crave consistency, clarity, and emotional transparency, not because they're needy, but because unpredictability was once dangerous. Their mind was trained to prepare for loss. They look for signs that they're safe, that they matter, that they won't be pushed away without warning. And while others may label them clingy, the truth is simpler. They are responding to wounds that have never healed. But there's another side to them, a beautiful one. Children who grow up feeling hated often develop a profound emotional intelligence. They understand pain because they lived through it. They can detect sadness in silence and comfort others with sincerity that feels rare. Their hearts become soft places for people who need warmth. They are empathetic, intuitive, and deeply sensitive. Qualities born from surviving a lack of kindness. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth is this. Despite everything, they never stop longing for love. They stop asking for it, but they never stop wanting it. Deep inside, they carry a quiet wish to feel chosen, to feel valued, to feel like they matter to someone. This wish shapes how they love, how they trust, and how they move through the world. Behind their strength is a wound. Behind their kindness is a story. And behind their survival is a child who never received the softness they deserved but still hopes quietly that one day they will. In the end, the story of a child who grows up feeling hated is not just a story of pain. It is a story of survival. Every wound they carried, every fear they learned, every wall they built was never about weakness. It was about adapting to a world that didn't give them the love they deserved. These patterns shaped them, but they do not define their future. Their past may have taught them to hide, to doubt, to overthink. But their heart still carries a softness that refused to die, even in the harshest environment. The truth is, a hated child grows into an adult who understands emotions more deeply than most people ever will. They know the weight of silence, the power of kindness, and the sting of rejection. They become the kind of person who listens without interrupting, who comforts without judging, who loves without conditions, because they know what it feels like to live without these things. Their empathy becomes their strength. Their sensitivity becomes their wisdom. And their scars become their reminder that they survived something many people never talk about. But healing begins the moment they finally understand that the hate they received was never a reflection of their worth. It was a reflection of the wounds, limitations, and brokenness of the people who treated them that way. A child is never responsible for the emotional failures of the adults around them. And when this realization settles into their heart, something inside them quietly shifts. They learn to set boundaries without guilt. They learn to speak up without fear. They learn to love themselves in ways no one taught them. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, gently, patiently, but it happens. And as they grow, they discover something powerful. They are not defined by the home they came from, but by the strength it took to rise above it. They finally find people who see their worth, who value their presence, who treat them with the softness they always deserved. They realize they were never hard to love. They just grew up in a place that didn't know how to love them properly. So the end of this journey is not tragedy. It is transformation. It is a quiet reclaiming of identity, a soft healing of old wounds, a rediscovery of self-worth. The hated child becomes the adult who chooses themselves, who protects their heart, who builds a life filled with the warmth they were once denied. And this becomes their victory. They turn their pain into strength, their silence into wisdom, and their broken past into a future full of possibility. They prove in the most powerful way that the human heart can grow even in the darkest places and still bloom. Before you leave, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because here we uncover the hidden psychology behind real human experiences, the wounds people carry quietly, the emotions they never speak about, and the strength they don't even know they have. Stay connected. Your story matters more than you think.